first thing Jack noticed was the smell of blood. Not his own, not yet, but sharp, metallic, and heavy in the recycled air of the docking bay. The sound of boots echoed across the steel floor, soldiers running, shouting orders in a language he didn't understand. And in the middle of it all, behind a shield of trembling royal guards, was the girl he had been hired to protect. Sophie. She didn't look like a princess, not to him. More like a frightened kid dressed in a gown too heavy for her thin frame. Her silver eyes darted across the bay, wide with terror, and her pale blue skin shimmered in the harsh lights. She clutched a small case against her chest as if it were the last thing she owned in the universe. Maybe it was. Jack didn't know the full story yet. All he knew was that he had been pulled out of retirement, paid in credits he hadn't seen since his mercenary days, to stand between this alien girl and the galaxy that wanted her dead. The first assassin came quick. A blur dropped from the overhead catwalk, cloaked in black armor, vibroblade aimed straight for Sophie's throat. The guards shouted, too slow, too clumsy, fumbling for their rifles. Jack didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. His body moved before his mind caught up. One step forward. A twist of his wrist. The barrel of his pistol flared. Once, twice. The assassin crumpled at Sophie's feet, armor smoking, blade clattering uselessly against the floor. Jack turned to the guards, his voice a low growl. If that's your best defense, then she's already dead. From now on, you listen to me, or get out of my way. The princess's eyes met his for the first time then. Not with gratitude, not with fear, but with something he didn't expect. Pride. Do your job well, human? She said softly, her voice trembling but steady enough to sting. And you may live long enough to see my throne restored. Jack almost laughed. Almost. But he didn't. Because in that moment, he realized two things. This girl wasn't as fragile as she looked, and whoever wanted her dead had just begun. The docking bay was still buzzing with chaos when Jack pulled Sophie behind him, weaving through corridors of steel and flickering neon. The alarms howled, red lights spinning like angry eyes, and every second felt like borrowed time. He didn't trust the princess's guards. Already, two had been cut down in the confusion, their armored bodies smoking on the floor. The rest moved like soldiers who had trained for parades, not ambushes. Jack spat a curse under his breath. Babysitting a royal. He'd sworn he'd never do this kind of work again. Where's the ship? He snapped, his pistol still warm in his hand. Sophie clutched the case tighter, her breathing uneven. Berth 17. A courier class. It's small, fast. Better be faster than whoever's chasing you, Jack muttered. When they reached the hangar, his gut clenched. The courier ship was there, yes. A sleek silver vessel with faint blue etchings that glowed against its hull. But so were the assassins. 3 of them, armored head to toe in black plating that shimmered like liquid shadow. They weren't shouting, weren't rushing. They just stood, waiting, like predators circling a trap. Jack raised his pistol. Stay behind me. Sophie's voice was ice. No. They want me, not you. Let me. She didn't finish. The first assassin lunged. Jack's shot cracked the air, but the alien's armor deflected it, sparks scattering harmlessly. A second figure closed in, blade flashing. Jack ducked under the strike, grabbed the assassin's wrist, and drove his elbow into the creature's throat. The alien staggered, choking, and Jack put 2 rounds straight into the gap under its helmet. This time it didn't get up. Run! Jack barked. The princess didn't argue. She sprinted toward the ship's ramp, her gown tearing against the metal floor. Jack fired cover shots, forcing the assassins back long enough to slam the hatch closed behind them. Inside, the ship hummed with dormant power. Jack threw himself into the pilot's chair, fingers flying across unfamiliar controls. You can fly this thing? Sophie demanded. Jack grinned, sharp and humorless. Kid, if it's got a cockpit, I can fly it. The engines roared to life, and the courier leapt from the hangar just as explosions rattled the docking station. Jack barely cleared the blast radius before stars stretched into streaks, and the ship jumped into hyperspace. Silence filled the cabin, broken only by Sophie's ragged breathing. She was still clutching that case like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. Jack finally turned to her, his voice low. You want to tell me what the hell I just risked my life for? Who are those things, and why do they want you dead? For a moment, Sophie didn't answer. She looked out the viewport, the hyperspace lanes reflecting in her silver eyes, and when she finally spoke, her words were steady. My name is Princess Sophie Vera of the Eladrin dynasty. My family ruled the world of Karen for 1,000 years, until my uncle betrayed us. He killed my parents, seized the throne, and declared me an exile. The assassins belonged to him. Her hands tightened around the case. Inside this, I carry the seal of Vera. With it, I can prove my claim to the throne. Without it, I'm just another refugee. He will stop at nothing to destroy me, and anyone who stands with me. Jack leaned back in the chair, studying her. She looked young, too young to be wrapped in politics and bloodlines. But her eyes carried something he recognized. Not naivety, not weakness, a fire. You should have told me this before I signed the contract, he said. You took the contract, she replied coldly. Now you live with it. Jack almost laughed. Almost. Before he could answer, the console screamed. Proximity alert. He glanced at the scanner, and his blood ran cold. 3 ships, fast and armed, had dropped out of hyperspace right on top of them. Outlaw vessels, mercenaries for hire. Sophie's enemies hadn't wasted any time. Jack muttered, Guess they don't want us getting far. The mercenary ships closed in, weapons primed. Jack's hands danced across the controls. Hold on, princess. Things are about to get messy. The courier ship banked hard, engines screaming as Jack threaded it between the outlaw vessels. Plasma fire lit up the void, searing past them, rocking the hull with shockwaves. Jack rolled the ship, diving toward the asteroid field below. Sophie gripped the seat. You're insane. Not insane, Jack growled. Just alive. Big difference. The courier plunged into the asteroid belt, massive rocks tumbling like mountains in slow motion. Plasma blasts chased them, scorching stone into vapor. Jack's reflexes were sharp, his eyes scanning faster than thought. Left, right, roll, dive, the ship danced between death and disaster. But the mercs weren't amateurs. They followed. Jack fired the ship's rear cannons, catching one outlaw in the engines. The ship exploded, fragments scattering across the belt. 2 down, Jack muttered. 2 more to go. The second mercenary cut across their flank, plasma fire tearing chunks from the courier's wing. Warning lights flared. Jack swore, yanking the controls, scraping their hull across a spinning boulder. Sparks rained inside the cabin. Sophie cried out, clutching her case tighter. Relax, princess, Jack said through clenched teeth. You hired me to keep you alive. I don't plan on failing. He cut power to the engines, letting the courier drift behind a massive asteroid. The mercenary ship roared past, unaware. Jack reignited the thrusters, swung around, and fired every cannon the courier had. The outlaw ship lit up like fireworks, shattering into dust. 1 left, but the last mercenary was smart. Too smart. It vanished from the scanner, cloaked. Jack narrowed his eyes. Come on, where are you? The console pinged. The cloaked ship decloaked right above them, guns aimed at their cockpit. Jack's stomach tightened. He didn't have time to dodge. Before the outlaw fired, Sophie slammed her hand onto the console. Strange symbols lit up across the ship's controls. Alien, glowing blue. The courier's hull shimmered, energy surging through it like veins of light. The outlaw fired. The plasma bolts hit the courier and vanished into nothing. What the hell did you just do? Jack demanded. Sophie's face was pale, her eyes glowing faintly. The ship is Eladrin technology. It responds to my bloodline. Without me, it's just a courier. With me, it's a warship. Jack grinned despite himself. Now that's a trick I can live with. The ship surged forward, faster than Jack thought possible, and unleashed a barrage of energy that tore the last mercenary apart in seconds. Silence filled the cabin again, heavy and stunned. Jack leaned back, catching his breath, his hands trembling just slightly. He turned to Sophie. "You should have led with that." Sophie met his gaze. For the first time, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Perhaps I wanted to see if you were worth the credits first." Jack shook his head, almost laughing. "You're going to be trouble, aren't you?" Her silver eyes gleamed. "You have no idea." They didn't speak much after the battle. Jack guided the courier into a safe hyperspace lane, locking in coordinates for a remote refueling outpost. The princess had retreated into the passenger bay, setting her case gently on the table as if it might break at the slightest touch. For hours, the silence was broken only by the hum of engines. When Jack finally rose from the cockpit and joined her, Sophie was staring at the case with an intensity that made him pause. "What's inside that box?" he asked quietly. Her eyes flicked up to him. "The seal of Vera, a relic passed from ruler to ruler in my family. Without it, the dynasty is nothing but a story. With it, I can rally my people. It is proof that I am their rightful heir." Jack leaned on the bulkhead, arms crossed. "And your uncle knows that, which means every hired gun in the galaxy will be chasing us until he gets his hands on it." Sophie's chin lifted defiantly. "Then let them chase. I will not stop." Jack studied her for a long moment. She didn't look like much, too small, too fragile. But there was steel in her voice. Something told him she'd fight with her last breath before surrendering. He respected that, though he'd never admit it out loud. When the ship dropped from hyperspace, the outpost floated ahead of them, orbiting a pale green world scarred by storms. The station looked half dead, its hull rusted, its beacon sputtering like a dying candle. Jack didn't like it, but they needed fuel and options were thin. As they docked, Sophie pulled the hood of her cloak over her head. "This place looks dangerous." "That's because it is," Jack said. "Keep your head down, don't talk to anyone, and for the love of all that's holy, don't flash that case around." The docking ramp lowered, releasing a wave of foul, recycled air that stank of grease, smoke, and something rotting. The outpost was alive, but barely. Corridors crammed with scavengers, mercs, and traders whose eyes lingered too long on Sophie's cloak. Jack walked close to her, hand never far from his pistol. They found the fuel master in a small control shack. He was no human, not even close. The alien was massive, with 4 arms, mottled red skin, and tusks curling from his lower jaw. His voice rumbled like rocks grinding together. "You bring trouble, human." His yellow eyes slid to Sophie. "I can smell it." Jack placed a handful of credits on the counter. "We just need fuel. That's all." The alien's gaze lingered. Then he scooped up the credits with a grunt. "Berth 12. Be quick. This station eats the slow." Jack led Sophie away, but he could feel eyes following them. Too many. Too sharp. By the time they reached Berth 12, trouble had already found them. A group of figures blocked the way, lean, wiry aliens with pale skin stretched tight across their skulls. Their armor was patched together from scraps, their weapons crude but deadly. Outlaws. Their leader, a scarred female with black eyes, stepped forward. "The girl. Hand her over, human. We'll make it quick." Sophie stiffened, clutching her case. Jack sighed and reached for his gun. "Listen," he said, voice calm. "You don't want to do this." The outlaw leader sneered. "Do you know who put the price on her head? Half the galaxy wants her dead. Do you really think you can stand against all of us?" Jack's gun was already in his hand before she finished speaking. The first shot dropped her second in command before the poor bastard realized the fight had started. Chaos erupted. Plasma bolts seared the air. Sophie ducked behind a crate as Jack moved like a storm, firing with precision that came from years of blood-soaked experience. Every shot counted. Every movement was survival. 2 outlaws rushed him with blades, snarling in a language Sophie didn't know. Jack ducked under the first strike, slammed his elbow into the attacker's ribs, and spun to fire point-blank into the second's chest. Both fell before they could take another step. But there were too many. The outlaws swarmed like jackals, driving Jack and Sophie back against the berth's steel wall. And then the ground shook. A roar thundered through the hangar, deeper than any engine. From the shadows emerged a creature larger than a hovercar, plated in dark scales, its many eyes glowing red. The outlaws froze, weapons dropping, their snarls turning to screams. The massive alien charged, sweeping through them with claws like blades, scattering bodies in its wake. Blood sprayed the walls, and the air filled with the sound of bones snapping like twigs. Sophie's breath caught. What is that?" Jack didn't answer. He raised his gun but knew even before firing that bullets wouldn't stop a beast like that. And then, something unexpected happened. The monster stopped, its many eyes fixed on Sophie, glowing brighter as if recognizing her. Then, with a slow, rumbling growl, it lowered its head and knelt. The surviving outlaws didn't wait. They fled into the shadows, terrified. Sophie stepped forward, trembling, her silver eyes wide. The beast lowered further, like a predator bowing to its queen. Jack stared in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me." Her voice was a whisper. It knows me. This is a Karen war beast. My family bred them for centuries, but they were said to be extinct." Jack holstered his weapon, shaking his head. "Great. So now we've got a giant alien dog following us around. Just what I needed." The beast growled softly, almost like a purr, as if amused. Sophie reached out, resting her hand on its scaled head. "No," she said softly. "Not a dog. An ally." Jack looked between the princess and the beast, and for the first time, he realized her claim wasn't just words. Her people, her throne, her dynasty, it wasn't a dream. The galaxy itself seemed to answer her call, and that made her enemies more dangerous than ever. The war beast followed them onto the courier ship, its heavy footsteps shaking the deck plates with every step. Jack wasn't happy about it, but Sophie refused to leave the creature behind. Somehow, it obeyed her like a trained hound, folding its massive body into the cargo bay without complaint. Jack muttered as he strapped into the cockpit. "One stray shot and that thing goes wild. It'll tear this ship in half." Sophie's voice drifted from the doorway. "It won't hurt me, and as long as you're under my protection, it won't hurt you either." "Comforting," Jack said dryly, throwing the courier into hyperspace. Their next destination was not chosen by preference but necessity. The fuel cells had been damaged in the last skirmish, and they needed repairs. The only place close enough to offer help was Calith Prime, a world covered in toxic wastelands where smugglers and scavengers ruled the broken cities. Jack had been there once, years ago, on a mission that ended with half his squad in the ground. He swore he'd never set foot on it again. But promises had a way of breaking when survival was at stake. When they dropped out of hyperspace, Calith loomed below like a corpse, its atmosphere thick and yellow, storms churning endlessly. The remnants of towers jutted through the clouds, broken spires of a civilization that had collapsed long ago. The courier touched down on a landing platform made of rust and scrap. Even inside the cockpit, the air gauges screamed warnings about toxicity. Jack pulled on his rebreather mask, checked his pistol, and glanced at Sophie. She had pulled her hood tight around her face. A small rebreather clipped at her mouth. Even hidden, her alien features drew stares. Calith was not the kind of place where royalty, exiled or not, walked safely. The war beast padded behind them as they made their way into the settlement. Scavengers scattered from the streets at its approach, whispering in fear. Jack didn't mind. Fear was better than attention. They found the repair shop tucked into the carcass of a ruined tower. The owner was a thin, insect-like alien with mandibles that clicked nervously as he inspected the courier's damage. "Fuel cells cracked," he hissed. "Warp conduits burned. Not cheap. Not fast." Jack tossed him a pouch of credits. "It'll be fast. Or you'll regret it." The alien swallowed whatever protest he had and scurried off. Jack leaned against the bulkhead, scanning the streets through the open hangar. Calith never changed. Eyes in every shadow, knives behind every smile. He didn't like waiting here, not with Sophie carrying a target so large. She seemed to sense his unease. "You've been here before," she said softly. He nodded. "Years ago, soldiers under my command died here. Caliph doesn't forgive. It just takes. Sophie studied him for a moment. Yet you still came. Jack shrugged. Didn't have a choice. Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of visitors. A group of armored figures entered the hangar, their helmets marked with a crimson crest. Jack's stomach twisted. He recognized that symbol, the Blood Crows, mercenaries with no allegiance but credits. And Sophie's uncle had plenty of credits to spare. The leader stepped forward, removing his helmet. His face was scarred, his eyes sharp with cruel amusement. Well, he drawled. The runaway princess. And her human lapdog. You've been hard to track down. Sophie's hand tightened on the case. Leave us, mercenary. You don't know who you're dealing with. The man smirked. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. And I know your uncle will pay double if I bring him your head intact. Jack didn't waste time on words. His gun cleared its holster, and the first blood crow dropped before the others realized what happened. Then the hangar erupted in chaos. Plasma bolts scorched the walls. The war beast roared, leaping into the fray, its claws ripping mercenaries apart like paper. Sophie darted for cover, clutching her case to her chest, eyes wide but unflinching. Jack moved with practiced precision, each shot a kill, each step measured. But there were too many. For every mercenary that fell, two more seemed to pour through the doors. He ducked behind a crate, reloading with shaking hands. Sophie slid beside him, her cloak torn, her breath sharp. They won't stop, she whispered. Yeah, Jack said grimly. I noticed. Then she did something that caught him off guard. She opened the case. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a small crystalline seal glowing faintly with blue light. The moment the lid lifted, the air seemed to hum, and the war beast froze mid-swipe, eyes blazing brighter. Sophie lifted the seal with trembling hands. You want to see why I cannot give up? She raised it high, and the glow pulsed like a heartbeat. The mercenaries faltered, their weapons lowering slightly as a strange vibration filled the air. The war beast roared, louder than before, and the glow surged outward in a shockwave. The mercenaries were thrown back, weapons clattering uselessly. Some screamed, clutching their helmets, as if the light itself was burning into their minds. When it faded, the blood crows lay scattered, unconscious or dead. The hangar was silent except for the beast's growl. Jack stared at Sophie, stunned. What the hell was that? Her chest heaved as she lowered the seal back into its case. It is more than a relic. The seal is bonded to my bloodline. It carries the will of every ruler before me. When I wield it, those who stand against me feel the weight of 1,000 kings. Jack let out a low whistle. No wonder your uncle wants it gone. The repairmaster skittered back into the hangar, eyes wide with terror at the carnage. Repairs will be ready. Soon. Very soon. Jack grabbed Sophie's arm, pulling her toward the ship. Then we don't wait. We leave now, before more of them show up. The courier lifted from the toxic ground, climbing through yellow clouds until the stars swallowed them again. For a long time Jack said nothing. Then finally he glanced at Sophie. You're not just a spoiled royal after all. She looked at him, exhausted but unyielding. I told you, I am the last of my line, and I will not fall while breath remains in me. Jack almost smiled. Almost. Good. Because I think things are only going to get worse from here. The courier drifted through the silent dark, its hull scorched, its engines strained. Jack had managed to patch the worst of the damage, but the ship felt tired, like a soldier past his prime who kept fighting only out of stubbornness. He understood that feeling too well. Sophie hadn't spoken much since Caliph. She sat in the passenger bay, the case beside her, staring into the stars as if searching for something only she could see. The war beast lay curled at her feet, its massive body rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. Jack finally broke the silence. We can't keep running. Sooner or later, your uncle's going to catch up. We need to hit back. Her silver eyes met his. You mean to face him? I mean to stop him, Jack said. One way or another. Sophie's lips tightened, but there was no fear in her gaze. Then we must go to the ruins of Elydris, my family's first stronghold. If I can awaken what sleeps there, it will give us a chance. Jack frowned. And if it doesn't? Then we die, she said simply. He almost laughed. At least you're honest. They set course for Elydris, a dead world orbiting a dying sun. The ruins rose from blackened stone like bones, ancient towers carved from obsidian, half buried under centuries of ash and dust. The atmosphere was thin, barely breathable, but still enough for life to cling in shadows. As the courier descended, Jack's instincts screamed. The place felt wrong, silent, watching. He'd fought on dead worlds before, but this one carried a weight heavier than war. Sophie walked ahead through the ruins, her cloak trailing across cracked stone. The war beast padded at her side, restless, its growl low and uneasy. Jack followed close, every nerve on edge. They reached the central hall of the ruins, a vast chamber lit by the faint glow of crystal veins running through the stone. At its center stood a black pedestal, carved with ancient runes. Sophie placed the seal upon it. The air trembled. The crystals flared with blue fire, light racing through the walls, up the pillars, into the sky itself. The ground shook, dust raining from the ceiling. Jack shielded his eyes as the light grew brighter, hotter, until it felt like the entire world was waking from a long, angry sleep. And then the sky split open. A fleet descended from orbit, warships, dark and massive, their weapons glowing like hungry suns. At their center, a colossal dreadnought loomed, its hull marked with the sigil of the usurper king. Sophie's uncle had arrived. The comms crackled to life, a voice deep and venomous filling the air. My dear niece, how touching that you returned to the bones of your ancestors. Did you think hiding here would save you? Sophie stood tall, the light of the seal reflecting in her eyes. Uncle, this ends today. Her uncle's laugh rolled like thunder. Indeed it does. Surrender the seal, and I may yet let you live in chains. Resist, and I will burn this world to ash. Jack's hand rested on his pistol, though he knew it was useless against ships that size. He glanced at Sophie. She didn't flinch. The pedestal roared with energy, and from the ruins, shapes began to rise. Ancient constructs of stone and metal, towering guardians that had slept for centuries. Their eyes glowed with the same blue fire as the seal. Sophie raised her voice, clear and defiant. I am Sophie Vera, rightful heir of the Eladrin dynasty, and I will never kneel to a traitor. The constructs answered with a roar of stone and flame, their massive bodies striding toward the sky as the enemy fleet opened fire. Jack grabbed Sophie's arm, pulling her back toward the ship. You just declared war, princess. Now let's make sure you survive it. The courier launched into the air, weaving through pillars of stone as plasma fire rained from above. The guardians rose higher, their bodies shrugging off blasts that could level cities. They struck back, hurling spears of molten energy that shattered enemy frigates like glass. But the dreadnought remained, its cannons tearing through guardian after guardian. For every ship destroyed, two more pressed forward. Jack's knuckles were white on the controls, dodging blasts that could vaporize them in an instant. We can't fight them head-on. We need to cut the head off the snake. Sophie's gaze locked on the dreadnought. Then take me to him. Jack stared at her. You're insane. Perhaps, she said. But if I do not face him, all of this is for nothing. For a heartbeat, Jack considered leaving, taking the ship, running as far as the stars would carry him. But when he looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, at the war beast crouched beside her, ready to leap into death without hesitation, he knew he couldn't. He was already in too deep. All right, he growled. We do it your way. But if we're going down, we're taking him with us. The courier surged forward, engines howling as Jack steered it straight toward the dreadnought's heart. The dreadnought filled the viewport, a mountain of steel blotting out the stars. Its cannons glowed with the heat of death, tearing through the ancient guardians that rose from Elydris like they were made of paper. Each explosion shook the ground, each fallen construct echoing with centuries of silence ending all at once. Jack's hands were steady on the controls, though his heart hammered. The courier was a knife against a fortress, and he knew it. But knives, wielded right, could still kill kings. "Docking Bay," Sophie said, her voice sharp, steady, unwavering. "There, take us in." The war beast snarled as if it understood. Its body braced against the deck as the ship closed the distance. Plasma fire scorched past them, one blast catching the starboard wing, tearing it half free. The courier shuddered, alarm screaming, but Jack didn't slow. "Hold together, you piece of junk," he growled, forcing the ship into a dive. The dreadnought's defenses opened, flak cannons spitting fire. Jack weaved between the bursts, the courier tumbling and rolling like a fighter half its size. Sophie held onto her seat, her cloak whipping in the air, her eyes locked on the enemy ship. Then, with a final surge of engines, the courier slammed into the dreadnought's docking bay, skidding across steel, sparks spraying like fireworks. The ship ground to a halt against a bulkhead, broken but alive. Jack ripped free of his harness, pistol already in hand. Sophie rose with the seal clutched to her chest, her war beast beside her, eyes glowing with fury. The docking bay doors burst open, and soldiers poured in, rows of armored troops, rifles raised, faces hidden behind black visors. Jack fired first. The war beast leapt, a storm of claws and teeth. Sophie walked between them, unflinching, the glow of the seal spilling across the steel like dawn breaking in the dark. They fought their way deeper into the dreadnought, every corridor a battlefield. Jack moved like he had in the old days, each shot a kill, his body remembering the rhythm of war. Sophie's presence was fire beside him, her defiance lighting the soldiers' fear even before they fell. The war beast tore through anything foolish enough to block their path, its roars shaking the very walls. At last, the throne chamber loomed ahead, grand, cold, lit by the burning sun of a dying star beyond its windows. And at the center, on a black throne of jagged steel, sat the usurper, Sophie's uncle. He was taller than she was, his blue skin dulled with age, his silver eyes cold and empty. Around his shoulders draped a cloak of shadowed fur, and in his hands rested a blade forged of living crystal. "Niece," he said, his voice deep and smooth, "you've come so far, but all roads end the same." Sophie stepped forward, lifting the seal high. "This ends today, uncle. For my family. For my people." He rose from his throne, the blade glowing like molten glass. "Then let history remember who broke the last of the Vera line." The chamber erupted into violence. Her uncle struck first, his blade slicing arcs of searing energy through the air. Jack dove aside, the heat blistering his skin even from a distance. Sophie met the strike with the seal, light colliding with fire in an explosion that rattled the chamber walls. Jack fired at the usurper, but the rounds disintegrated before they reached him. The man was shielded, his armor woven with power Jack couldn't begin to understand. The war beast lunged, but her uncle swung his blade in a wide arc, cutting deep into its side. The creature roared in agony, collapsing but still snapping its jaws defiantly at the tyrant's feet. Sophie cried out, her fury igniting the seal. Blue light flared across the chamber, slamming into her uncle and forcing him back. For a moment, Jack thought it might be enough. But the usurper's laugh rolled out, cruel and confident. "You are strong, child, but strength is nothing without will, and mine will not bend." He surged forward, blade raised for the killing blow. Jack didn't think. He moved. He threw himself between Sophie and the blade, his pistol blazing even as he knew it wouldn't stop the strike. The crystal sword tore through his armor, fire ripping into his chest, but he kept moving forward, forcing himself against the pain, forcing the tyrant back by sheer defiance. Blood filled his mouth, hot and bitter, but his voice was steady as he spat the words. "You picked the wrong damn human to underestimate." The distraction was enough. Sophie raised the seal, and with a scream that carried the weight of every ancestor before her, she unleashed its full fury. The chamber became a sun. Light swallowed the walls, the floor, the throne, burning with a purity that cut through steel and bone alike. Her uncle's scream was lost in the brilliance, his body dissolving into nothing as the seal's power shattered his reign forever. When the light faded, silence remained. The usurper was gone. The throne lay cracked and broken. Jack collapsed to his knees, blood pooling beneath him. Sophie dropped beside him, tears streaking down her pale cheeks. "Don't you dare leave me now," she whispered, her voice breaking. Jack managed a weak grin. "Relax, princess. I've been shot worse." "You're lying," she said, gripping his hand. "Yeah," he breathed. "But it sounds good, doesn't it?" The war beast limped forward, pressing its massive head against Sophie's shoulder, its growl low and mournful. Jack's vision blurred. He looked at Sophie one last time, seeing not the frightened girl from the docking bay but a queen in her own right, blazing with strength. "You'll do fine," he whispered. "Better than fine." And then his eyes closed. The stars turned. When Sophie finally rose from the chamber, the seal glowing faintly in her hands, she was no longer a princess in exile. She was queen of Elydris, heir restored, the tyrant undone. Her people would rise again, and the galaxy would remember. And somewhere, in every whisper of defiance, in every act of stubborn courage that kept humanity alive among the stars, Jack's spirit would live on. Because humans were never the strongest, never the fastest, never the most gifted. But when the galaxy tried to break them, it always learned the same truth. Humans do not break